Welcome to the Compromise to Alchemize podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Neil Bolton-Donnie. I'm excited as you join me in this journey to listen to my conversations with some of the leading experts in the field of healing from a broad range of disciplines. Hello and greetings to a replay of Compromise to Alchemize podcast. Today, I'm going to introduce the episode that I did with Cherionna Menzam-Sills back in 2024, just a year ago. September 30th is when we published this. So really loved that conversation. And in fact, I got to say right at the front here, Cherionna has been so gracious, even after we did the episode, and we've had email correspondence. And then, of course, I realized that in the midst of all my travels and everything, um, that yeah, I sent her a message. And anyways, if you're listening to this, Cherionna, as well as the email that I sent, you are so just wonderful and kind. And I want to mention that we've seen Franklyn Sills, Cherionna's husband, has passed away, and so many people have given tributes. Many people have um, spoken words of love and wisdom. Um, so many people that would consider both of them mentors, and um, I, just really felt like those heartfelt messages really carried so much, um, not information, but the weight and the gravity of how, of course, how many people were admirers of, but I had learned from Franklyn Sills. And of course, I know, Cherionna in this episode, she mentions just a bit about their relationship and how she considered him a mentor, of course. And so I feel grateful to consider Cherionna a mentor in a way, not having met her in person or directly learned from her, but just in terms of the Spirit into Form book that she wrote. That's the reason I reached out. And it's also a book that I've mentioned at most, if not all, of my trainings, the Floor of the Mouth Tour trainings, on, for me, one of the most insightful resources on embryology. And then I also want to give Cherionna the proper credit for the term embodied embryology. Really cool in this episode, we also talk about, her, um, we talk about Santa Barbara, and many greats have taught in Santa Barbara, and she, in fact, is responsible for the kind of this field in terms of embodied embryology. But also, and you're going to listen to this. If you're listening, you'll tune in. You'll hear her story. You'll hear about mentors of hers. We're also going to talk a little bit about who she's influenced, and of course, there's people on the podcast that I've interviewed that would consider Cherionna as like a big part of how they really felt their way into this field of pre and perinatal psychology. Or there's many different kind of perspectives. This is why Cherionna is really a wealth of a resource and carries such depth, is because she does have a lot of hats, like she says in this. Not only like from the craniosacral and biodynamic and um, that work, but also she started as an OT, occupational therapist, which I find fascinating. Uh, and of course, then we have her educator role with pre and perinatal psychology, and but then the embryology, and so much. I know I'm going to leave many things out, but again, this is only meant to be an intro to the replay. I'm replaying this because um, I really felt like if I wanted to share something this week that was a replay, I wanted to go back and see what would feel really poignant. And um, happens to be last year this month. Happens to be okay. So something else I want to mention is Cherionna has finished a book, The Prenatal Shadow, and in fact that was published March 4th. we have that in an email thread. I saw that. I realized, oh, I can't believe, I was going to get back to her about that. And my hope is that I can sometime soon interview Cherionna again, and we can talk about that book and other things too. Um, so definitely, we will link to those books so you can take a look at them. Something else Cherionna mentions in here, in talking about her greatest mentors, is when she mentions Franklin being one of her greatest mentors, or a mentor. I said, yeah, Dawn, my wife, I consider her one of my greatest mentors. And um, yes, as we talked last night, um, after spending a great day with some friends on Labor Day, we just talked about um, so many things. And I just know that, I've learned a lot from her, and I have a lot that she knows that I have yet learned that I need to learn. Oh, I also want to just make sure I'm also just saying, in the many people I get to collaborate with, Ina Henry, if you're wondering what's going on with this office, right? It's a lactation consultant's office. Technically, I'm looking at her diplomas. She's, has many different um, histories and degrees, but she owned a brewery once. So we got to throw this in there. Uh, Spent time with her family, another family in the Carpentry area, and uh, she, I hope it's okay. I say that she, I said that's pretty different. I mean, that's a you've gone from one thing to something so different. She's like, well, technically, it's still the beverage industry. So from brewing beer to brewing milk, and helping people through it, right? So what a very empathic and kind and gifted support person and healer is Ina Henry, and that has been wonderful to be able to not only collaborate on patient care, but also her graciousness to welcome me to use her office on the days like today has been amazing. So without further ado, as I'm going on and on in here, uh, I'm happy to be home in one way, meaning from my travel all over. Really excited about the fall. And yeah, as we kind of sit in to listen to this, um, I really hope you just hear the wisdom in Shireena's voice, but also look forward to perhaps some future conversations that we'll have, and enjoy. And please comment and share.
All right. Well, hello and welcome to my podcast. This is Cherionna. I've been really excited to chat with you. I think since October of last year, when I originally thought of you, sent you an image of me with your book at a yoga retreat that I was at, and it was just this really beautiful moment where I was provoked to reach out to you. Actually, I reached out to you and Donna Leah right at the same time, and it was really kind of a time where I felt like reaching out to some people who have inspired me greatly, and that you have. And I wanted to just say that it's an honor to have you speaking with me on my podcast. Just to kind of say that it's the embryology chapter, volume, and portion of my podcast, which kind of shifted from being called embryology to compromise to alchemize. But I really feel like you've come along at a perfect time in the trajectory of my podcast now that I've interviewed about 10 people to speak to this life journey of from compromised to alchemized. Of course, that's my words. Those are my words, but I know you have so many more words to describe what it's like to see people through this lifespan of healing from your work with pre and perinatal psychology to embryology to your background in biodynamic craniosacral. And I wanted to say there's so many words to say about who you are and what you do. And then I also think something that speaks volumes is several at least a good amount of the people on the podcast that I've had and others that I've talked to, and many out there consider you a mentor, and very literally, as in you've been part of their training and how they've come into what their work is. And then I just know how many people I've talked to, Instagram and otherwise, who have said Cherionna is, because they maybe have seen me posting about your book, Spirit into Form, the one that you've written, and they've said she was one of my greatest inspirations in this work, of embodied embryology, or perinatal psychology. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say welcome. I'm so happy to have you on. I mean, and I would just love to have you, the general, address us all, or just just kind of thanks for being here, and thanks for being such an inspiration to many.
Oh, thank you. I feel really touched by that. What a sweet introduction. That, yeah, it just really warms my heart hearing that. I'm just kind of going along doing what feels right to me.
Mhm.
And, fortunately, it seems to help other people, which is an intention also. And, I feel really grateful, like I've been guided through my life to various situations and mentors, which were, it was all about my healing. But in doing my healing, I then developed tools to help others. And so, it's wonderful to hear that. I've been listening to your podcast and going, wow, like some of my students are like big names now, or they're like really doing amazing stuff. And they were amazing people, of course, but not and the students and colleagues, I should say. Um,
Yeah.
like I knew Frank from Continuum. We
Hmm.
we kind of like siblings in Emily's studio. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and Donalia too, from Emily's work, and some of the others I just knew, or they were my students or colleagues, and some of our mentors we had in common. So um, maybe I'll just say a bit about how I got to be to where I am right now, and where that might be going. And just to say on a physical level, so I'm from Canada,
Hmm.
but I am living in beautiful ancient Elizabethan town of Totnes in Devon in the UK, where I never
Hmm.
expected to be. But my dear husband, Franklyn Sills, and I got married 14 years ago, and I moved here. So here I am. And I love being here. It's just really beautiful.
Okay, and then we'll quickly then get it back to what you were just saying with how you got to where you are. But I realized I didn't say that you and your husband Franklyn, listening to you both, and I thank Ryan Helford on the craniosacral podcast for the way that I first came across you and your husband. And so I'm thankful to that podcast. I listened to many of his episodes, and that's where I first came across both of you, and in both inspired by what you both separately have and hold within the healing space. And um, just seeing, how that world, even if just through the narrow window of the craniosacral, biodynamic craniosacral, and that perspective that I gleaned from how, it's about this container of holding space for people in a very physical, somatic way. Um, that's that really was like my first entry into knowing you. Um, and so I think that made me think some people will be, this is the first way they'll know you. There's so many out there who have known you and you're so known. And in fact, it's this paradox of, I feel like to introduce you feels like, well, I'm saying what most people know. And yet for this, portion of people out here who are coming because they've, listen to me on my airway and feeding specialty, or any of the collaborative work that I do in that airway and feeding world, and then separately just any of the different ways people are coming through to see you, and they may not know who you are. um, it at the headline here, could you just say, kind of in a nutshell, how would you describe you to somebody who hasn't come across this kind of work before? And and then I'd love to have you go into mentors and all those things you mentioned.
Right. Um, well, I find it a bit difficult too, because I have a lot of hats that I combine, put
Right.
them, kind of like the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. I think I one on top of the other, um, which creates something new. So, well, my original background was as an occupational therapist, which I did for a few years, and it really informs me. I'm grateful to have that background. Um, and I was a potter for a few years, and
Ah,
um, but how I identify myself these days is mostly as a somatic pre and perinatal therapist, psychologist, and a continuum teacher. I
okay.
know people heard a lot about continuum already on your podcast,
Yeah.
and a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. And so I all of those come together, and they all inform, your podcast, or this part of it is about embryology. Yeah, I've
Hmm.
been teaching embryology through movement and the body since 1997, where I developed a way of doing it that I called embodying embryology as part of my PhD in pre and perinatal psychology. Um, but that's already a ways into my story. And I know some people call me an embryologist. I don't quite relate to that term, but embryology is a great passion for me. And maybe I'll just say this at this point, that the reason I studied embryology is because I was fascinated by pre and perinatal psychology.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that how could anybody understand the psyche before birth if they didn't understand the physical development? Because, we're not thinking about things before birth. We're experiencing them directly. And I think of the prenate as being a lot like an adolescent, it's like their bodies are changing constantly. And so that means their reality is changing constantly. And, what I've learned from embryology is that the embryo develops in relation to its context. Cells develop differently in the embryo depending on their context. And so that informs my work a lot if I'm teaching embryology, obviously, but, as a craniosacral therapist, I'm providing a certain context for people to dissolve and reform in. Continuum is all about dissolving and reforming in a different context. And pre and perinatal work, I teach small womb surround process workshops, these days all online, which is amazing that it works, but it does. And I really think of it as providing a different context where we can learn actually on a cellular level, what something different than what we learned back then. So that's a bit of a long explanation for who I am. um, but I've had a long journey to get here. Should I talk a bit about my mentors?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So, um, where to begin? um, well, maybe I'll say it because it is influential. I became an occupational therapist because my mother was a nurse in nursing homes. And I got my first jobs in nursing homes when I was a teenager. And there was an occupational therapist, Marilyn Garfinkel was her name, who
Mm.
was working in this nursing home where I worked. And she ran the activities department, and I became an activities aide. And I just loved Marilyn and what she was doing. I thought she was amazing. So, I think I was 16. I decided I wanted to be an occupational therapist. So not knowing anything about OT, but I did learn. So she inspired me. And that was a great background. I learned anatomy. I learned half of our training was in psychiatry, mental health. So, it was really helpful. And I got a lot of experience with people through that. So, um, that's great background. But what happened was I was also a folk dance fanatic, doing international folk dancing from all over the world. And without going into all the details, I had a concussion doing folk dancing.
Mm.
And it kind of knocked me out of my left brain, and I think I needed to change. I needed to slow down, and I needed to come into my body. And, and it knocked me out of my usual way of functioning, to the point where, again, to make a long story short, I ended up leaving my OT job and started studying clay ceramics. I actually took it was called Commercial Ceramics program, where we learned every aspect of working in clay, and I became a studio potter, and then I started doing bits of occupational therapy here and there. But it's like the concussion brought me back to what I think I was like as what was available when I was a child before I learned to, think too much. I become really intellectual. So it brought me back into my intuitive creative self. And it also led me to various forms of holistic healing. And that led me into body work. And so I started, again, long story short, I started studying. Well, I started finding myself doing kind of intuitive counseling, and that led me more into my body. And then I started studying body work, thinking, well, I was doing like this amazing healing work with my hands. I had no idea what was going on, but it was very powerful for both me and the client. And so I thought, as it got more physical, I thought I should probably find out what's going on here.
Mhm.
So my mentor there, I think, was spirit. There was something
Yeah.
guiding me. And so I started taking body work courses, and that led me into my body and all the trauma there. So I started doing, therapy and healing. And at one point, I was living in Vancouver at this point. I was doing massage and body work. And I think it was within a week, I had two different male clients who were both way taller than me. I'm about little over 5 feet tall, and they were at least 6 feet. They were big guys. Completely separately, they birthed themselves off my massage table in the middle of a session. And somehow I guided them off the table onto the floor as they were going there. And we both knew what was going on. They were being birthed, and they needed to do that. And again, I didn't know anything about that, but I knew what was going on. One of them decided I was a midwife for the soul.
Hmm.
I thought, well, and I could claim that. Maybe that would be a short form of saying what I do. I am. That was 30 years ago. So I had also through my healing gotten into dance, which I always loved dance. But I'd kind of shut that down somewhat. So again, to make a long story short, I ended up going to Naropa in Boulder to study dance movement psychotherapy and somatic psychotherapy. And one of our courses one of my mentors there were two mentors there. One was Christine Caldwell, who developed the program, which I'm very grateful for. And the other was Susan Aposhan. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's an amazing body psychotherapist who integrated body-mind centering from Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, BMC, into psychotherapy and developed her own work called body-mind psychotherapy. So she was one of my teachers at Naropa, and then I did her very first training in body-mind psychotherapy. And then I worked with her for years, and she's been a huge influence for me in terms of how I work. I'm just so grateful for her. And she also intuitively knew about pre and perinatal psychology. And Christine brought that into our program. Because if you're doing somatic work, you're going to run into pre-verbal and prenatal and birth experience. So we had a course in our second year, I think it was, called something like Birth and Death in Body-Centered Psychotherapy. She really saw that, like those two portals in and out of tend to resemble each other. And I remember sitting in that class going, this is it. I need to do this. And Christine was just completing her Ph.D., I think, in somatic psychology at the time, with the Union Institute. And I realized I needed to do a PhD in pre and perinatal psychology, which didn't exist at the time. William Emerson also came and taught a workshop around that time. And, that blew me away. and I ended up studying intensively with him for 6 years. So he was another mentor. And so I ended up creating my own pre and perinatal psychology Ph.D. program because there was no other way to do it. And William's work was part of that, actually. But I became interested in Ray Castellino. I'd been hearing about him. And actually, I knew Myrna Martin quite well from William's work, and she was encouraging me to do Ray's training. I kept thinking, well, he's a chiropractor.
Right.
Chiropractor. I want to study psychotherapy. Whereas William's a psychologist, he must know about that. But after I'd done enough with William, I decided to take a workshop with Ray, and it was amazing. And so I decided to take his training. And in order to take his training, you had to take at least a 5-day introductory course in biodynamic craniosacral therapy. I was already doing craniosacral therapy, but not that type. And so I was living in Boulder at the time, and John and Anna Chitty were my friends, actually. I actually my office was in their building that they had gotten in order to bring Franklyn Sills for a training there. And I could hear their trainings happening on the other side of the wall, and a lot of my friends were doing them, and they'd practice on me. And so I thought, when I finish my PhD, I'll do that. But I was pretty busy. And I kept trying to take a 5-day intro with John, who kept setting them up and then canceling them. So finally, he was starting a training, and I thought, I really want to do this work. Why don't I just take the training? And I asked John, I don't know if you knew John, dear John,
Didn't.
but I said, one of John's favorite sayings was, sleep is overrated. Right? He was the wrong person to ask, but since I had a lot of work to do for my PhD, I asked him if there was a lot of work involved in this training. And he's like, oh, no, don't worry about it. So I took their training, and, it was life-changing, which that course always is. And Anna Chitty was really a major mentor for me, though we were already friends, but we had actually met through Susan Aposhan's training. But I adore Anna. And I felt like she created such an environment of unconditional love in her classes, and I wanted to do that. So I trained with her to become a teacher of biodynamics and started teaching. And in the meantime, got invited to teach at the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute, a new school. And I'd met Marty Glenn, who started it with Judith Weaver. I'd met them both actually through William Emerson's work. So they invited me to teach there, and I ended up moving there so I could teach there more, and which meant that I was able to study with Ray very intensively for several years while I lived there. And I felt like I lived at his house for a while because all his work was happening in his house, and doing all of it, either taking it or assisting him, or I assisted him in his clinic, Beba. And dear Ray Castellino, he was a very important mentor for me. I feel like he still is.
Yeah.
I feel informed by him all the time. I miss him terribly. So then, the other major mentor I have to mention is Emily Conrad.
Yeah.
And I had been introduced to Continuum the first semester of my training in dance movement psychotherapy, where we each had to lead the class through some form of movement work that we had done. And somebody had taken a little weekend workshop with Emily and thought she knew what Continuum was, and led us through a continuum exercise. I've since learned there are no continuum exercises. Emily would say continuum is an inquiry into our fluid nature. And and it's an inquiry process. It's not an exercise. But I hated it. It gave me a headache, and I thought, I'm never doing this. So 11 years later, I think, I got the call. I just started feeling like I had to go and meet Emily or I was going to die.
Mm.
And she was in Santa Monica. I was in Santa Barbara. It's a
Yeah.
2-hour drive.
Couple hours. Yeah.
Traffic. And I started driving. I had promised myself when I moved to Southern California that I would never drive on the freeways. The only thing that could get me to do that was Emily. And I landed her class, just shaking, and she go, your nervous system is really activated, isn't it? She thought I was just like that. But so I fell in love with Emily and Continuum, and ended up, after a year of commuting, which was really hard, when she had class at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So I, get up at 4 and drive, miss some of the traffic, and then I'd sleep in my car for an hour and go to class, and then go home again. But one morning she announced that she was going to start a class on Wednesday as well, because she realized we needed more classes. And I was kind of like, oh. And she looked at me and she said, what? And I said, I'm going to have to move here. And she said, New York, right? Yes, you are. So I did.
Wow.
So then I had the amazing opportunity to just really dive in with Emily for about 5 years. I lived in Santa Monica and, did everything she did.
Wow.
So she was an amazing mentor.
Yeah.
In the middle of all that, I was going back to Boulder for a while to assist Anna. And then she and John brought Franklyn to Boulder for a postgraduate seminar. And I basically fell in love with him sitting in the audience. So I never thought it would happen. But I thought it was just the model for what I wanted. 2 years later, he came back again for another postgrad, and I went and was assisting him, and we connected a little bit more. And then two months later, we were both presenting at a conference, a biodynamic conference, and we really connected. That was the beginning of our relationship. So, he's been a mentor for me also. I think probably every partner is a mentor, but, he wasn't my teacher in biodynamics, except for those 2 postgrads. But we've taught together a lot, and I learned so much from him. So much clarified from working with him, being together with him. So, and it turned out that we both knew William really well. And, he and Ray were really good friends. And, we had all this background that was similar. So yeah, so we're together, still in love. And I'm still grateful for him. So I think that covers all my mentors.
Wow, that's so. Yeah, you just, there's such a richness. Every time you're mentioning somebody else, I'm like, oh my gosh, that person and this person and all the peers that you've had, contemporaries and mentors. As you mentioned, it's extraordinary to think of this arc, throughout time, and it's, you can tell a lot when you hear you say you had to create this program at this postgraduate institution, and Santa Barbara has a lot of you. As I've come to talk to some of you in this world, I've talked to Don Hanlon Johnson some, and just hearing how so many of you wonderful, amazing pioneers some of you go back to Santa Barbara as a place it began, or a place you began something. Boy, there's too many places to go in that whole timeline you shared. But actually something really, I loved how you were, that drive that you made from Santa Barbara to Santa Monica. And so we'll be in Santa Barbara in October. Next month, we'll be down there for most of the month. And I'll be making a drive from Santa Barbara to, Malibu and, in Agoura Hills and Calabasas. I'll be seeing some patients in that area. So there's a
Oh,
couple of
beautiful.
days I'll be doing that drive like you did, for a different reason, but I'm going to be now meditating on that drive you made. Just thinking, whoa, I get to kind of almost walk in your, proverbial highway, tire steps by thinking about that time. And
Well, say
uh,
hello from me.
yeah, I will. I feel like the places matter so much, and the fact that we could go to every place you mentioned in terms of like who you've learned from, and then also the finale there. I don't think it's the end of things, but the finale there where you said, you spoke of your spouse, Franklyn as a mentor, and I think similarly, Dawn, my wife, has been one of my greatest mentors, and then I've learned so much about things, but also myself in the context of our union, in the context of our relationship. So, um, I think there's like just the people you've spent time with. It's it's just so clear for you. Like that was like that was always, or that part of your life is still alive in you. As you mentioned, Ray very
Mm,
much informs you today, and
yes.
and I just see that. So I think it's like I just felt like myself going to this place of imagining and being present with you as you shared, and so it almost feels like I've been there because you've given us such a good portal of what that looks like. I feel like that's such a really cool through line for people who know that you came from being an OT and you journey through body work. And a lot of people who I collaborate with are, OTs, SLPs, PTs, all the letters, as you have many letters, but and a lot of, craniosacral fascial therapists who come to, we talk and collaborate, and they come to trainings, and but it's a really beautiful how you and Susan Aposhian, well, I don't know her directly. I've had Bob Lenberg on my podcast who studied with Bonnie. And so, in a way, I feel like I've been able to kind of glean from and learn more and more about body mind centering. But then I think it was when I first was thinking of you and reaching out to you, I saw and I read some work that, with Susan, in her work with bringing in like the mind and the psychotherapy aspects to body mind centering, and how you and her have had this really great learning experience. So I I think it's really such a vast terrain in healing that you've covered.
Mm.
So I feel like this was good really to hear about so much of that, and I think it gives such context to where you come from.
Well, thank you. I realize I left out someone really important.
Yeah, please.
It's probably a current mentor, and that's Jaap van der Wal,
Oh yeah, okay.
an amazing spiritual embryologist. And
Yeah.
I took a workshop with him, my first workshop with him years ago that John Chitty organized when I was in Boulder. And, it blew me away, of course, as he does everybody, I think. Um, and I've taken several workshops with him. But then when I wrote Spirit into Form, I
Mhm.
asked him if he could write the forward for it. And when I sent him the manuscript, he didn't just read it and then write a forward. He read it and gave me all kinds of feedback. Like I learned so much from him and made changes based on it. Um, and he also insisted I have a second person write a forward who actually knew about psychology because he said, I'm not, I don't know about that stuff. But, he continues to be an influence for me. Thank goodness he's still around. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I've
Yeah.
got your book here. I know this is the old fashioned way to show things here. I'm going to be sure to share a link for that because this book has been so influential for me in my journey, in my studies, Spirit and Form. So I really, Thank you for that. And, you know, Yap, hearing him speak just on different podcasts and all of that, I've been able to just learn a little bit more about his perspective and his, um, you know, his wisdom. And so it leads me to say, you know, I think that there, this is so, just talking about embryology, we could fill up, you know, volumes and the rest of our time. And I would actually love for you to, you know, give us a bridge for, and there's so many ways you'll talk about this, I'm sure, but what comes to mind in the most of embryology and um, quick, you know, 20-second preface. And a lot of people who I know who are following me, or, you know, they know like, oh boy, you know, embryology is a gateway for healing for, you know, all ages. But can you share us, whether it's an anecdote, you know, in a particular, you know, person you're thinking of with a womb surround, or any of the work you've done, could you give us an example of how embryology is so relevant to, you know, all ages, but especially people who are trying to heal? How does that show up?
Hmm. Well, if I could just say something first, that I really think about embryology in terms of our original potential. You know, we start as a little unicellular organism and we develop these complex bodies. Like, what's up with that? You know, like that's amazing potential.
Mhm.
So people often come to, well, to womb surrounds and even embryology classes, hoping to jump back into their trauma from that time and learn about what happened. And that isn't my emphasis, especially embryology to me isn't about that. An embryology class to me isn't a good container for looking at your trauma.
Yeah.
Um, a womb surround is, but to me, the purpose of looking at our trauma is so that we can come to our potential.
Hmm.
You know, what have we forgotten about? And God, I don't know. There's just so many people who have found their lives lightened up after that. You know, people are really drawn to it. They're really curious. I think they intuitively know that it's going to be really helpful for them. Um, these days, I do the womb surround work, but in terms of embryology itself, you know, our physical development, um, I mostly teach it through continuum these
Mm.
days. Originally, I taught it more in a BMC type way.
Uh-huh.
And I know that Bonnie has since developed, she now teaches classes around embodied embryology, but I never heard of her doing that back when I started in the 90s. That was
Hmm.
just, you know, in BMC, it was embodied whatever, but
Yeah.
well, embodied embryology. And, you know, I don't know if I could think of one person. It's like, it's just kind of in general, you know, people will do a dive where it's along the lines of how we developed in the womb. So I'll offer some information about how we actually develop in the womb. Something like, for example, our midline appears really early. Day 14 is the primitive streak, but there's an energetic midline that's there before that, which we know in biodynamics, we sense that. Um, and so, you know, I'll just give people a little information about that, and then we'll be with that. And people tell me afterwards, I could see it, you know, like they feel more aligned, or they feel more grounded, or they feel like um, they can meet people in their lives from a different place, you know, where they're inside themselves and not jumping out. And I think from the womb surround work, you know, that's one of the most important things is people find changes in their relationships, where they're not just being the dependent little one or, you know, being defenseless, or being hurt all the time, um, or looking for the womb to implant in, or looking for their lost twin, but they start to be able to actually be an adult in relationship, and then they find some satisfaction. I've just seen that so many times. It's
Mm.
like challenging to pick out one person. in that respect. Well, I can think of somebody, actually, I have a new book coming out called The Prenatal Shadow. It's coming out in March. And I told a story in that book about someone I worked with many years ago, who um, we were doing some birth work, I thought.
Mhm.
um, so she started to go into something like, typically when people are doing birth work, they start pushing into their head in some way. And so she'd kind of gotten down, crouched on the floor and started doing something like that. And I offered her my hand as something to push against. And all of a sudden, she reached out and grabbed my hand and started crying and wouldn't let go of it.
Mm.
And it turned out she'd lost a twin very early on. And our work, so we were doing psychotherapy and ongoing work. So our work became about her being able to reach for her twin and have the twin. And then after she'd had enough of that, we had to practice letting go. Right.
Mhm.
And so that was hard in the beginning, but she gradually was able to let go and be herself. And what happened in having done that work is, first of all, she had some um, kind of an eating disorder. And it's like she was looking for her twin in her food.
Mm.
She was never satisfied. She'd just eat and eat and eat. She stopped doing that. And so that was quite profound. And she started, I think it was shortly after that, she actually found a boyfriend, which she had really wanted, but she hadn't been able to have a relationship. So, those are pretty profound changes from a little bit of work. Well, maybe, I don't remember, probably went on for several months. Not a little bit of work, but so,
Yeah, that's so profound. I think the general and the specific are so informative. And boy, I was just speaking with somebody who came in, and um, maybe to skip all of that, maybe come back to it, but getting to how you gave that example of somebody who with an eating disorder, was looking for something to solve or fill that. Some people, as you go down this, I call it a rabbit hole. I think it's a good term to use in some senses. You're looking for healing, and people want to look, and people are looking for what's underneath all this and where is the root cause. And people can look at food allergies or traumas. And in your work and in this work, it's just so clear, like when you give those examples of like these the imprints, and seeing the clues and the signs that tell you, oh, this is where things come from. But just in sitting with that person, you can get to this place of where, you know way before she came into this world, there's the root of her suffering, but the beauty of her being able to come into an experience to where she can um, fully find that root of her pain and suffering, and then find fulfillment and joy. And I just think that it's as it is priceless, because how many places could she go and look in the world, and how many conversations and you know even psychotherapy sessions could she have, but until going to that place. And I know there's, when I come across people in what I do, and and I uh, sometimes go there, and it's because it's not the focus of my practice and what I do. I'm really, I was provoked and leaning into helping people with current airway and feeding issues, and navigating with moms and babies in that breastfeeding diet journey, to adults who are referred to me by surgeons, and they're trying to prepare for a tongue tie, palate expansion, or a jaw surgery, so I see them before, during, after, to optimize their results so they can get their life back and breathe. And, I can't help inevitably go to this place of, sitting with them and saying, like this one woman who came in and we're on this journey of unraveling things. And the last time, kind of helped her with her pre and post-op frenuloplasty, her tongue tie procedure. She's already had kids, and she's but this place of anxiety that comes through. And as we, I took a few minutes during a bodywork container to go into that space of going through the timeline. And I, spoke to a great grandmother that we were seeing the origin of anxiety and coming through. And even though we didn't, actually, I'm, she's somebody I want to refer to you, but, or those who, like you, navigate this with such experience. But even in that 5 minutes, maybe, of addressing those things, we saw her come to a state of nervous system regulation that was way better than any of the body work that we were doing. And I've seen glimpses of this, and I have experience of this with patient encounters where we delve into that and we see, in navigating some of those areas, it's, I'm like, wow, I tell them, I say, okay, let me just step out of this and say that I'm witnessing what you're witnessing. And if I would have gone down this, thread of doing body work on you for another 20 minutes without addressing this, I don't know if we would have ever gotten here. So thank you for being willing to go through this with me. And I just view these instances as very precious and sacred. And so hearing you share that, I think, oh, what a sacred, beautiful thing that is. So, I think that's just a beautiful way to look at what your work is for many. But while there may be suffering and pain that leads them to you, and yet you can sit with them and see their moments of transformation and change where they find answers. And I think that's what everybody's looking for, is where is the answer for what I've got going on, and who can I be with, and who can I go to, and where? And while I think there's a big push, and I love it, on going inside and going to that inner space and sit with yourself. And I think that's really profound. But I mean, so many people they don't know what's possible. So they need somebody like you to, like you're doing right now, to share what's possible so that they can even expand their consciousness to be able to go to a place of self-inquiry to navigate to these things. So
Yeah. Well, also, if I can just say something, like usually our trauma is relational. It happened in relationship. And so it needs to be healed in relationship,
yeah,
probably. I
yeah,
mean, I did Vipassana meditation for many, many years, and it was incredibly valuable,
yeah,
but there was more to do on another level. And the combination of body work and an understanding of this territory is just so profound. I mean, the reason that Ray wanted people to have biodynamics as a background is because we use it like in the womb surround process work. We're holding people, if not physically, at least energetically, um, with an awareness of tides and that kind of thing. It helps to settle the nervous system. It helps to have a wider perspective. But
yeah.
also in doing body work, as you say, these things come up. And I have an example, which I was
Mhm.
thinking, that you work with babies. I think, you probably appreciate this. Can I tell a story?
Please do.
So this is also many years ago. A little 8-week-old boy came to me with his parents, of course, and there wasn't anything particularly wrong. They just knew that craniosacral work was valuable for babies, so they asked me to do some. And I didn't really notice any problems in the first session. He was totally delightful and he seemed to enjoy it, and things felt pretty good. And a little bit here and there, but nothing major. So they wanted to bring him back again. So he came back, I think a week later. And what babies often do is they'll take one look at me and go, "Oh, you get it. Okay, look, here's my burden." So he waited till the second session to do that. And, it's like all of a sudden he went into his birth and he needed to show us the whole thing. And
Mm,
so, I was surprised because I hadn't felt it. Um, but, everybody needs to tell their story, even if it's not traumatic. If you've had a big event, like birth is a big event, right?
yeah,
You want to
yeah,
tell somebody about it and you want them
yeah.
to get it. So, he told his story, as babies do, through the body. And he finished and he was very happy. And parents were kind of amazed. And, I reflect as we're going along because I could understand what was happening. And when he was finished, I said to him, I'm really sorry I missed that. I just didn't get that, that
Mm,
happened to you. And he
mm.
just looked at me, he started laughing and
Oh,
laughing.
wow.
It's like the power of repair is
Yeah.
so important. And they say, I guess for secure attachment, you just need to um, have accurate reflection about a third of the time, right?
Mm,
If you don't, then do repair. So he loved that I was doing repair, that I was actually acknowledging what happened and that I'd missed it, as well as that
mhm.
I'd held it. And he was
Yeah.
clearly, he thought it was hilarious, you know. So, people think that babies aren't conscious and aren't aware and don't understand language. And well, that's total nonsense as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really beautiful. I love that. Just, and it makes me think, in the, a lot of the people who come in have been, they're journeying with a doula and or a midwife in terms of like still, moms who do hospital births as well. But I'll hear this phrase often where they'll say, "Yeah, our midwife said that likely the baby was, my baby was in this position because his hand is like this, and when he comes out, and I'll say, okay, because they're coming in with a very specific issue like a shoulder dystocia, or they're coming in because of rigidity in the fascia, and I'm saying, yeah, I would love to thank you for coming in, and I would love to, so I get the pleasure of being able to hold these little newborns, and this one yesterday who just, you reminded me of that. Well, I said there's a a 6-day old, a 2-week old, a 4-month old, and an 8-month old. Yesterday were just, I have precious adults who came in yesterday, so I'm not saying they're not precious. I love them too. But
Very special to work with newborns, though.
very special. And that little newborn came in. My wife Dawn always, she cracks up. She said, or she makes me crack up. She said, whenever you say, because I'll come in and if I say that to tell her like about something that happened that day in the office, she'll say, I can't help but picture every time you say that this little baby walks in on their own feet through the door and said, "Hey, I'm happy to be here," and, and so I love it. But
I'm
so
sure they would if they could.
sure they would, and they pull all these, they pull all the parents in with them, so I get to meet so many people because the babies want to come in, um and so so I'll often say, oh yeah, I see your baby is like holding that position, and so I'll have this little being get back into that position, and then I'll see sort of a retracing, unwinding happen from there, so we can go back to that kind of place as like an event horizon within their birth. um, and I just love these long, when it's what I'm thinking now of Kate White telling me something that is very nuanced and saying, holding the gaze of a little one when is good for them to hold it with you and when it is not good. But often I love that moment in the meeting with these ones where we look into each other's eyes and I think, how special is it that I get to be here and acknowledge this little one? And some parents come in and they're very conscious of, and they're talking to baby in the womb, and they're very aware of the consciousness of this little one, and some of them who've never done that. And so in those moments I'm like, I get to be this person who maybe I've been aware of you because I was caring for your mom before you were even conceived, and then through the timeline, been able to nurture this connection with you through body work with your mom, and sometimes through with the belly, through the belly with you. So anyways, I just love those conversations. And but yeah, that level of recognition and validation you're talking about is so extraordinary to think. For sure, any age of person that gets that with the various offerings you do, or the kind of work that you do, is beautiful. And yet to think, wow, what an extraordinary thing when a tiny new one gets that from the get-go, how that would help them enter into this life. So I often, through inspiration from you and Ray Castellino's work, although I never met him, I often, I just say it very casually, but I'll say, welcome, welcome to this world, welcome here, welcome. And I just feel like that, that there's nobody that doesn't want to welcome. And so some of them were welcomed through trauma and stress and all of that in this world. And so it's a beautiful privilege to get to do work with these babies, as you mentioned. Boy, I don't know where to go from here. I want to go every single place that we can go, knowing that the place that we go is priceless no matter what, because your sharing and your wisdom is so, I think timeless is what, I feel when you're talking. And it's like, this is a great, it's you're a sage who, like you said, came into this, and you do what you've done, and you've just done what you've seen to unfold. So you're not trying to make this thing happen. You're living your life, and in the way that it's unfolding, you're sharing. And I'm, eager for more people to come across your book and your work and your new book coming out, which I'd love to share anything you have on that with our, the show notes and anything like that. But, I think that in this precious container of time, I think of like the people who feel that they're, whether they just feel like they can't get to that place of like, where is the root? Where is what I'm dealing with coming from? I just think, is it super simplified for me to ask you this or not? Where if somebody's struggling for where did this all start? Where can I go? And maybe they've tried everything like body work and EMDR or brain spotting and, somatic experiencing, and maybe they've dabbled in a lot of different things. I don't know. Is there a place that you would say, maybe try here, maybe try this or try that? Where would you how would you guide that?
Well, yeah, I think that's a really important question. And to me, it's not so much about the technique that the practitioner uses, but
Mm-hmm.
have they done their own healing work around this and have an understanding of this? So actually, one of my passions right now is I run a training called Our Journey Here, it's an online training for practitioners of different kinds. I get a lot of psychotherapists, but also, different kinds of body workers and people who work with kids and birth workers and, all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what kind of practitioner they are, but my intention is to teach them about this material and help them to do their own work so that they are more able to recognize and meet that material when it comes up in session work. And so it's unlikely that a practitioner is going to be able to do that if they haven't done their own work. If they've started doing their own work, like, a lot of people know that they got stuck in the birth canal. They're going to assume that every client that comes to them got stuck in the birth canal.
Right.
Or, they lost a twin, which is very common. They're going to see that in everybody.
Yeah.
But if they've done enough work, then they can just receive the person and whatever it is that actually is their background. And so I would say, look for somebody who understands this stuff and has done their work.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people have done the Castellino training. There's a Castellino training website, or people who've done my training. It's a relatively new training, so I haven't got a list of practitioners yet, but I think I'll have that soon. But they could I can recommend people also. Or there are other trainings around this work. Um, and, somebody who understands it and is holding it is more likely to be able to support the person,
Yeah.
whatever it is they do. So I'd say look for that. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a really that's such a great help. For those who listen, would you say at this point you point in the direction of others through your trainings and through your these people who you're mentioning, or that generally, and do you do any, are you at a place, do you do any current sessions with people personally and one-to-one basis, or more trainings for others?
Yeah, I'm getting older, so I'm shifting,
Yeah.
and my practice is just way too full, basically.
Yeah.
And mostly it's supervision and mentoring at this point.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I'm shifting more into teaching a lot more, and I love writing, and I want to write more, and so I'm not taking on new clients at this point. If somebody can, my womb surrounds also, they fill up ridiculously early.
Yeah.
For this year, they filled up within, I think, a month or two of me posting them for the whole year. It was totally crazy. To be fair, I only have 4 people in a womb surround, but
Right.
there's and I may be the only person in the world right now teaching it online, doing it online. And that appeals to people who are, places where there's nobody doing them in person. And it's easier for a lot of people to do it that way. So, I'd love for more people to be offering them online, because
Yeah.
I hate saying no, I don't
Well,
have,
yeah. Well,
but
I know many people who you who speak so highly of you, who have been trained by you, or have come across your work and others. It's really wonderful that you have this training that you offer. And I know those who I kind of come across on my current practice and collaborative work, they're often, there's the intrigue when I talk about embryology, and I'm bringing it from the anatomical perspective, but I quickly dive into the you could call it esoteric, but I mean, for them it might seem esoteric, but I more talk about the embodiment in the pre and perinatal, just all these different strands. And I often will say and point to you and others, saying to really dig into this work, this is where I recommend you go. So I really am eager for you, just to, for your trainings and those to be a resource, because I have many brilliant and beautiful and amazing, like, DCs and DOs, PTs, and all these practitioners who are, a lot of them are, um, they're helping many families with these airway feeding issues, but often they have their own kids, and then they've gone through these journeys themselves, and maybe they're moms of multiple kids. And so a lot of these, they're looking, there's like, ooh, I really was drawn when you were talking about that, and I want to know more about that. And I say, great, because I can talk about it some, but I have people who I know have been talking about this for decades, and they are ones who I would consider, you know, in this conversation in your book, I've considered you a mentor for me. So I'm so thankful that I get to point people towards ones like you who have this expansive knowledge and wisdom. And so thankful that you're teaching, so thankful that you're writing, because you're going to be able to, in these online trainings, it's because the online surrounds, because so many more people want, to come across this, and they're going to be able to do that because you're putting this out there in multiple media and multiple forms. And I think that's really such a huge valuable resource for us in this world.
Thank you. Well, something that might be useful, that people can do easily, is my continuum classes. I offer a continuum class once a month. It's a 3-hour class, and it's from 4 to 7 UK time. So your time on the West Coast, that's 8 to 11 on a Sunday morning. So nice way to start a week,
There you go.
Um,
Yeah, nice way.
so that's I have an online school that Franklyn and I started together, which is resourcingyourlife.org.
Yeah.
The courses are there. So, they're anybody's welcome to join those. And most of them have an embryology kind of focus or background to them. Sometimes I teach a little bit of embryology as part of it. But I started, I had been teaching embryology more influenced by BMC, but when I started doing continuum, I realized that it immediately takes us into an embryo type state. And that it was just a much more direct way to help people to embody this experience. So yeah, I can recommend my continuum classes. They're all online, so they're easy, they're accessible. The training, starts at 10 a.m. my time, so that would be 2 a.m. your time. That's a bit difficult. People on the West Coast. I've had people do it. I even had a couple of people from Australia last year, which is the middle of the night their time, when we ended like 2 or 3 a.m. And I was like, whoa, I wouldn't do that. And I had somebody from Mexico and Brazil, so
I once heard this quote about a wise man named John who said that sleep is overrated.
Right. I guess they believe him.
Or yeah, the training is really valuable. So I think people will be happy to sacrifice just a little bit of time and a little bit of inconvenience for the wealth they get and they receive. So well
Just
yeah.
to say, I'm just about to start one for this year.
Okay.
But I haven't planned the one to start in a year yet. But I do require that people take at least one womb surround before the training.
Okay.
I'll be posting dates for next year soon.
Okay.
But quickly. They don't have to take it with me. They could take it with someone else. But, I like to get to know them. It's nice if we do it together. So I'd say plan ahead if they actually want to do the training. But, there are other things too. If people are interested in my other classes and offerings, I have a website, which is birthingyourlife.org.
Yeah,
and that
good.
has, when I keep it up to date, it has all my events on it.
Perfect. Oh, that's so great. Yeah, when you've given people some really great places they can go to keep in touch on what you're doing, and any other ways for people to find you, or if those are the main ones, amazing. Are there any other places that you'd recommend
I
people
have
go?
a YouTube channel, which is Birthing Your Life, which
Great.
probably of interest. And I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. And as you discovered, I'm on Instagram, but I never look at it. So that's not the best way. I need to learn how to use it, but I've never figured it out. So
Well, hey, I'm just happy you found my message and you got back to me, because I don't know if I reached out to you via email as well, but you reached back out, and yeah, no,
it was a total miracle. I just happened upon it. I don't even know how I got there. That's the problem. I don't on Instagram. I was like, what? A message from, what was it, January that I just found, So thank you for waiting.
you're so I was wow, no, it's there's kind of the waiting was well worth it, and in being able to have talked with you, I think it was last week, and get to know you more on a personal level. I'm just really thankful for that. And but I've learned just not only from what you put out there, but in our conversations last time, this time, I've learned more. And I just think you are, you have what you've taught and you have what you've shared. But I think what who you are is wisdom, and you are a well of where you pull from. You are kind of intuitively led, and you share, and you're putting yourself into a place to where you're a resource. So that means, I think, as soon as we allow you to, as soon as somebody asks you and you give an opportunity to share, there's current, fresh new wisdom that will come out, even if you've told a story before. There's a specific um, thread of, the now, in the present that carries, to where somebody who hears this may be touched by that strand or thread of what your voice is conveying from the immaterial realm, from where you were inspired, and that spark might, illuminate something that was a place for them of hopelessness or despair. Or and I think I loved that you talked about repair, and how relevant repair is, and how we're going to miss things. People will miss things. And the important thing is that if you can have repair and give repair, people can, I think you said it was the 1/3 of things come through repair, 1/3
Yeah.
of, yeah, that was a really beautiful thing.
To do
So,
it a third of the time. We only need to be in sync really a third of the time. If we miss things, the rest of the time do repair.
yeah.
So, yeah. I was just, thank you for all that. I hope it touches people and inspires them. And I love doing these, so maybe we can do it again. But I was just reminded as you were speaking that another thing that might be useful for people, since you speak so highly of this, my Spirit into Form book, which is quite a tome, it's 500 something.
Yes. Yeah.
So I did a course called Spirit into Form Being with the Book. That was a year-long course. We met once a month for 2 hours each month, where people would read 1 or 2 chapters each month and then get together. And I'd present a bit of material. I'd lead people through some experiential. And in the live courses, there was a chance to go into a breakout room and talk with people.
Right.
But I did that actually for 2 years because it was so popular. And then I decided to do it around my other book. Do you know about my first book, The Breath of Life?
I do. Yes.
So, yes, I did one around that, and then I'm going
Okay.
to do another one around my Prenatal Shadow book that I think I'll start at the beginning of April, or in April after it comes out in March. But if people are interested, the Spirit into Form one is still available. You get the recordings for life. So people, it wouldn't be live, but people could do it that way through my resourcingyourlife.org.
Okay. All right.
website.
Making a note of that. Thank you. I'm making a note of that because that'll be great. Just another format for people, because I do think that I'm intrigued by that too, just because it's such a tome, as you mentioned, and there's so much substance in that book. And so to offer another format for some others that tune in another way would be really wonderful. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm thinking it could also be quite a lovely thing for, if there was a group of people who wanted to study it together, they could go through the course together and get that support. Because it is a big book, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It can bring stuff up.
Yeah.
So, and bring up, it can be inspiring too, it might be stimulating, think about things and talk about it with other people and exchange ideas. So, could have Spirit into Form clubs.
I love it. Yeah, it's like a book club, and then some. So is it audio recordings or video?
They're video recordings.
Oh, great. Oh, that's
And
great.
there are some materials. Mostly it's like links to YouTubes and that kind of thing. But so for all my courses on resourcing your life, you get a course page and it has different materials on it. It might just have the video recording, but I don't remember exactly what I had for that, but there were some other materials as well.
Yeah, I think when you spoke to, perhaps we can chat at another time as well, meaning I would love to do part 2 and talk some more, and perhaps we can chat about that, and just to glean more from you, to have you share more, and maybe even share more next time about your book. But also just yet again, I would love to pull from the wisdom you carry, and to be able to just talk, for me personally, just to be able to talk with you is a wealth. And then for me to be able to share with those who come across this, how significant this is, that they could learn ways, or come across ways to get at the essence of who we are, and how can we, know and heal. I mean, because I do think you, to ultra simplify what you do, is there is a very specific healing container, and then there's a knowledge container of just to know about something. So I would love to talk more about that with you. And is there now, kind of, you've given so much already, but is there anything you feel like you would want, to convey? And I'm thinking, boy, there's all kinds of people who I speak to, both practitioners and, we can speak to people who are coming across this because they're seeking healing. And I think for me, a lot of people who come across me are parents because they're seeking, resources for their kids, or maybe it's their spouse, or maybe themselves. But I call them healers as well, and all of us, I think, are seeking healing. And so we're trying to untangle from webs of constrictions. So, do you have anything that you feel like just really would be wonderful to share with healers out there in all those contexts, on how they can, think of tomorrow when they wake up after hearing this? What's a thought I don't know, this was just more extemporaneous. So I hope you don't mind that, but I thought, if they wake up in the morning, when they wake up in the morning, and when they wake with a thought, what would be perhaps a good, affirmation meditation that could sum up all of what you said in one simple phrase? That's a very complicated thing I've asked you, but I'm like, I just want to ask you that.
I only got one.
Yeah.
Well, what comes to mind, there's lots of things I feel like saying, but what comes to mind is I already made it through that time. All of us have survived the challenges. Every stage of development involves challenges, and we've all made it through those challenges as an embryo and at birth, and since then, and our children did too, or they wouldn't be here. And so it can be helpful just to remind ourselves that we've made it through. I think the other thing that just kept coming to mind, well, two other things, if I may.
Sure.
And one is, when you speak about parents, I think that it's so profound just to acknowledge what happened. We'll talk about this more if we talk about my Prenatal Shadow book. But shadow happens when things aren't acknowledged.
Mm,
For the most
yeah.
part, our earliest experiences is never spoken about. Nobody even realizes it happened. So it goes into the unconscious and gets acted out all the time. So, and people feel unseen and unheard and not even there.
Yeah.
So, just acknowledging, yeah, I'm sorry, that was really hard, or whatever it was, or we, were surprised when we found out that we were pregnant with you. And then we got really happy you were here, but I'm sorry,
Mm.
we had that hiccup in the beginning. And I'm so glad you're here. So that takes us back to the other thing I want to say, which is we can come back to our original embryological potential at any time, because it's always there. It's our inherent health is always there, waiting for us to remember it.
This is profound. Okay. And can I ask you one more question on the middle
Sure.
one? The middle one. When you said shadow happens when things aren't acknowledged. And I thought, oh boy, that's now, I would love, I'm so excited for a potential next chat about that. But I just can't help but think of, if someone feels that they weren't, and that they never were, and that the people, that they can't get this from the people that they need it from, what's a glimpse of, or some comfort on that for them. Like, where can they get this from if they cannot get it from whom? And maybe the question is, where does this acknowledgement come? Is it not really from another person? Is it more from, so if people are like, well, I can't get that because it's not available because of the things, where can I get this from, or how can I get this acknowledgement?
Well, um, come back to, you want to be with a practitioner who understands
Yeah,
and can acknowledge it. So, therapy is really valuable. Womb surrounds are really valuable.
great.
And I think usually it does need to come from another person at some point, to
Hmm.
get that established enough. Some people are, if people have had that a little bit, then they can start to do it for themselves. And actually, on my YouTube channel, I have a meditation that's called something like meeting and welcoming your inner little one. Something, I forget what it's called, but something like that.
Okay.
And where I guide people through actually
Okay.
imagining, sensing themselves as a little one, and then acknowledging that they're actually growing up, and have all kinds of resources now that they didn't have then. And what in your current age, what could you offer to that little one? And so, we can acknowledge to the little one, we can say to the little one, that was hard and I'm sorry and I'm here now. And, give them a hug if that's what they need or whatever it is. Um, but, people might need that to come from someone else first before they can do that.
Yeah. That's really great wisdom. Thank you so much. I love that. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, and I'm gonna. Oh yeah, that meditation. We'll see if we can get that, and then I'll look for that, and I'll just add that into the show notes so people can check that out. I
Oh,
think
great.
that would be a wonderful resource for them. So, well, Cherionna, thank you so much for sharing um, all you did and sharing yourself and sharing in this time container. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. And I know this is going to be touching deeply some of the, people who get a chance to listen to this and watch this. So, thank you so much for doing this. And I so much look forward to another time of chatting about all these things.
Well, thank you also, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and we could go for hours, I'm sure. So let's do it again. I'd love to do that. And thank you for all that you're doing too, spreading the word about all
Yeah.
this stuff. So important. And
Yeah.
I think it's so healing. So thank you.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. So, all right. Well, we are off, but have a wonderful, beautiful day, everyone. And make sure you, um, once you look at the show notes, you'll be able to see all of these wonderful things Cherionna has shared. And I just encourage you to, if you're a practitioner, really consider her trainings and stay tuned to what she's doing, or, all these things. Just, I can't wait for people to experience the benefit of it. And then for those who are just listening, driving, and, come back to this and just remember the nourishment I think you got when listening, and to see how this plays out in your own lives so that you can, as I'm saying, from embryology to living an alchemized life of beauty and integration, let this be a blessing for you. In these conversations, we do deep dives, and resources are aplenty. So please tune in and enjoy. And I'm so excited to have you along for the journey.